Truth, not trends.
Not trends.
What is going on out there, party people?
Party people in the house. It ain't no party like a TNT party because I'm.
What's TNT?
TNT. Because the TNT party don't stop.
How you doing, people? It's Jesse Schmidt and Liam Bauer coming back at you.
That's right. We sound jolly, but we're here for somber reasons, sort of. No, we're celebrating.
A little bit. It's still the podcast where we help you maximize your strength as safely
and efficiently
as possible.
That's right.
Today, for the first time ever on the TNT podcast, we're going to bring you a rebroadcast.
That's right. Re-release.
This is one of our earliest episodes. This was episode number 18, I think it was, with Gary Bannister, who, unfortunately, if you weren't already aware, we regret to inform you, just passed away this month,
August 12th,
August 2022. So Gary was an accomplished author. He had an ongoing relationship with Arthur Jones, who, if you're just tuning into this podcast, is one of the greatest minds to ever grace the fitness industry. And
he also wrote
awesome
some of
guy.
our favorite books of all time. Gary wrote several really great books, one of which is called What They Won't Tell You, Golf Performance Training, which we highly recommend, and a classic high-intensity training book called If You Like Exercise, Chances Are You're Doing It Wrong.
So definitely a couple books worth reading, and you can tune in to hear our interview. This is also funny because today is day 1,941 of my strength coaching career.
Wow.
Liam's coming up on 35 years.
I'm less than 2 weeks away.
And when we interviewed Gary way back, I think I had been a trainer for around a year. A little more, a little less.
I was still saying like 30 years, I think, right?
That's right.
That's how long ago this episode was. You'll recognize the sound quality is quite different. Intros are different. All kinds of things are different if you haven't dug back into our early catalog. But the content is as good as ever.
Good as ever. And before we get to the interview, we want to remind you to check out a couple of our podcast partners. The first one is Low Cal Foods Cali.
That's right. Feed your inner athlete.
That's right. Feed them good. And these guys are really going to have your back when you are slammed in your schedule and you just can't find the time to cook some food. McDonald's is calling your name. They're wafting those smells down the block. But you know what? You planned for it.
I go for the 7-Eleven chili cheese dog.
No, you don't want 7-Eleven chili cheese dog. You want some low cal.
Low cal.
You want some delicious, healthy, pre-prepared, just heat them up in the microwave meals.
That's right.
Because you know what? You got goals to achieve.
That's right. Muscle to earn, fat to get rid of.
That's right. So low cal is the way to do it. And you can get 5% off your next order by using the discount code TNT Strength 5. To keep eating healthy. Feed your inner athlete.
There we go. And we can never forget our favorite band-based home training system, the Harambe system, built and made with loving care in the United States of America out of high-quality stainless steel, high molecular weight plastic. This is a band-based resistance system made by our friend Khalid Borbea out in NYC. It is basically complete. You can do anything you can imagine, any kind of barbell exercise, any kind of dumbbell exercise. It has all kinds of cool components. You can get a discount of 15% on anything in the Harambe System store when you type in the code TNT on your way out. We highly recommend this if you're looking to train at home. It can slide under the bed. You can take it in the car. It goes everywhere. It does everything. Get one.
And please interview this enjoyment.
That's right.
Please enjoy this interview
with our friend and mentor, Mr. Gary Bannister.
I said increase your skill, increase your strength, and reduce your body fat. That's it. Strength in the stomach muscles has nothing to do with low back problems. Nothing. I asked Dr. Booker when the matter started to crumble, I said, well, what's going on? I said, why was this machine rejected by the medical community, specifically orthopedic? And he told me, he said, it's simple. He said, it would have put us out of business.
Stand by for action. We are about to launch
Truth, not trends.
Truth, not trends. What's up? Hey, everyone. What's going on?
Here we are.
Here we are. Jesse Schmidt and Liam Bauer, coming straight to you from
Our mother's basement.
straight from it. Today is another overcast day. We're waiting for that California sun to come back out because
Yeah, we got a sudden cold spell all of a sudden. What's going on?
my name is Jesse. I've been a personal trainer / strength coach for 379 days now. I'm sitting next to the man, the myth, the legend, Liam Bauer. He has been a strength coach for
30 years.
30 plus
And
years.
counting. I still haven't figured out what I want to do when I grow up.
That's okay. We'll figure it out.
I'm working on it.
Today we're interviewing Gary Bannister. Gary is a personal trainer. He has been for many years. He's a former amateur golfer. He's the author of In Arthur's Shadow. If you like exercise, chances are you're doing it wrong. And his most recent book, Golf Performance Training, What They Won't Tell You.
Yes, 3 awesome books. Gary was kind enough to join us today. John Turner made a nice bridge for us. This community, our community is growing every day. Circle is broadening. He was kind enough to join us from Florida with tons of experience, great stories, words of wisdom to share. And so I know you guys are going to enjoy it. And we're still, just so you know, sifting through the cards and letters. We like snail mail here at the TNT, and we still haven't decided who gets the honor of hosting Jesse's party.
The 1 year party. We'll figure it out.
It's coming.
Maybe we'll go to Florida, party with Gary.
I think we should. Jim Bryan's down there. We'll get a gold guy. Flanagan, they're all down there. We're going to have a big party down there.
We're going to Florida, everyone. Anyway, we hope you enjoyed this interview with Gary Bannister. Hello?
Hello, Jesse.
Yeah.
This is Gary Bannister calling from the Quest of Florida. How you doing?
Doing all right. How you doing, Gary?
Yeah. Hey, Gary, it's Liam. I'm really glad that you were able to call us in today.
Well, I appreciate you liking me as well. I got your name through John Turner, a good friend of mine in Canada. So.
Yeah. No, we were lucky enough to have John. I think John was our first official guest, actually, and he recommended highly that we call you. Actually, John and I have sort of been communicating for a while now via email as well, and talked on the phone long before this whole podcast thing came to life. And he had actually, I was always asking him about your books, and it was him that sort of tipped me towards them. So I picked up your first couple of books a while back, In Arthur's Shadow and the, If You Like Exercise, which is probably my favorite. I carry that book around a lot.
John mentioned that you referenced it to a few times. I appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah, I joke with my clients because sometimes I have it in my bag, and I try to make my clients work very hard, obviously, and I'll say, oh, you guys probably wonder what I'm looking at. I go, here it is, and I pull it out and I go, if you like exercise, chances you're doing it wrong.
Well, actually, that quote came right from Arthur Jones. I listened to a number of his lectures and took a lot of notes, and especially the quotes that he came up with were rather intriguing. And so I copied a bunch of stuff down, and then at some later point, 10 years later kind of thing, I decided to use some of those quotes in my book. And of course, he'd probably written a bunch of them already in his own articles and stuff like that. But it was always interesting to be around him and listen to what he had to say. So.
Were you based in Florida at the time when you first came into contact with him, or?
No, I wasn't. I was at McMaster University, where pretty close to where John lives.
Right.
In fact, he was fascinated by the fact in my first book that I probably ran by his house when I ran 30 miles when I was 21 years old, just for something to do. And anyway, my exercise physiology teacher got me interested in it about a month or so before I graduated. He called me very excitedly down to his office, and he had these pictures of Boyer Co. and Nautilus machines and some girls in fishnet stockings, whatever, and promotional material. And I'd been interested in weights since I was 14 or so. And I'd been lifting at the school. We had a pretty lousy weight room there. It was outside in my living room there. And that was all we had. It was just a school of 12,000 students. So it was pretty inadequate. Nobody lifted weights during that time. My exercise physiology teacher showed me these pictures of this new Thinking Man's Barbell Nautilus machine. And I'd never seen him so excited. He was not an excitable person. So
that's awesome.
That got my attention a little bit. And anyway, once I graduated, I went to school down in Greensboro, North Carolina, for a master's degree, rather than stay in Ontario and get a teacher's certificate, which I wanted to do in the end, become a phys ed teacher. And so I basically, when I went to Danville, I graduated from University of North Carolina, Greensboro, went to Danville, Virginia, got a job there almost instantly the day I was leaving. In fact, got a phone call and had an interview and went up there and taught at a school named Averett College, which is now Averett University. And in the town there, one of the teachers said, "Hey, I'm going to a gym. Why don't we just, why don't you come over and see?" And this guy had about probably 10 or 12 Nautilus machines. And I was quite excited because I read about them and saw pictures of them, but never saw them. And so I went there, and that's basically how I got interested in Arthur Jones. I was in Virginia at the time.
Yeah.
And I ended up at one point going up to the factory as well in Independence, Virginia.
Right.
Where they were making machines. Drove up there one time and saw what was going on. But I went down to Florida a couple times, and actually from Virginia, I went to South America. I spent 14 years in Caracas, Venezuela, which is not the place to be. That was about 15 years too many, actually.
Yeah, it sounds like quite an adventure.
I read in your book, Liam was nice enough to lend me golf performance training, and I read that one day you had Miss Venezuela walk into the gym.
Yeah, well, it was Miss Universe.
Oh, Miss Universe. Excuse me.
Yeah, Miss Universe. That's even better. I had a Miss World in there one time too. I had a Miss Universe, and I had a bunch of girls that were in the Miss Venezuela pageant. Down there was a big deal,
Yeah, I think
stuff was big. So
yeah, isn't Venezuela like the most Miss Universe winners per capita or something?
Yeah, they won quite a few, and
so there was a plan in going down to Venezuela.
It seemed like every other year they're winning it or coming in second or something like that.
So you
deal. And, of course, the guy that ran the pageants come into my gym, and the guy was a complete idiot. He didn't know anything about exercise, and he wanted to bring the girls in there, probably I think for a photo shoot, just to show that these girls do exercise or some nonsense. And he wanted to let me train or try to get this girl into better shape because he was the expert and thought that he knew a lot about it. He knew certainly about what they look for from a judging perspective. So, and he told me, quite frankly, he said the way this girl is now, and he showed me a picture of her coming down the runway. He said she will not win Miss Universe, and it was about a month away. And I didn't know that at the time. I said, "How much time do we have to do this?" And he said, 1 month and 5 days. I needed a surgeon, pretty much. But anyway, and so not much could be done. In fact, he was supposed to bring her in, and did not show the next day, to the disappointment of all my trainers. But and so he was bragging about that he knew exactly what they look for, and that we have to do these changes and all this kind of stuff. But it was ridiculous in terms of what he was asking. And then, of course, she won Miss Universe, despite the odds.
Yeah.
I suppose without exercise and probably without surgery. Didn't have time to do surgery for that. So this guy wasn't much of an expert. That's the way experts go, as you know. There's many in this field as well.
Absolutely. Well, that's awesome.
But Gary, I really enjoyed reading your book. Liam, I haven't gotten to If You Like Exercise, Chances Are You're Doing It Wrong, or In Arthur's Shadow yet, but I'm looking forward to reading those. I did get a chance to get through golf performance training though, and I have to say there was a lot of amazing information in there that I had not known before. And one of those things was you talked a lot about lower back exercises, the prevalence of lower back injuries and lower back pain, and the difference between some certain machines. You want to talk to us about that a little bit?
Yeah, when you look at just the golf perspective, the PGA Tour, well, started off with a group from California, I think it was, a Sentinel Hospital group, and they ran the tour band, the fitness band, for the first 5 years on the women's tour, I think senior tour, and the regular PGA Tour. And they kept statistics on why people were coming into the band, what kind of injuries they had. And the largest injury, the greatest one, was low back pain, and that would be understandable. So I went into the fitness bands at one point. I visited one of the bands, and they had nothing. They had nothing in there but a bunch of Cybex machines. They had some kind of a deal with Cybex, and they would only buy their equipment. So I remember Dr. Fulton and Arthur Jones made some attempts to try to get the Med-X back machine into the fitness band, but unfortunately Jack Nicklaus at the time was kind of a spokesman for the PGA Tour, and he was with a guy named Peter Egoscue, who had written a few books about back care and fitness himself. And Nicholas was big on using Peter Egoscue's system, which was no machines at all, and really nonsense when you look at it. But anyway, that influenced their decision not to do anything. Plus, they had this contract with Cybex.
Yeah.
They weren't going to do that thing anyway.
So what kind of exercises was Jack Nicklaus doing that were not machine based for his back?
Well, if you ever read Pete Egoscue's book, he basically divided people into four types. And you basically look at a guy's posture and the way he walks and put him into one of those four categories. And then each category had a series of 10 or 12 exercises, basically calisthenic type exercises, stretches, stuff, all body weight oriented, no weights, no machines, nothing.
Gotcha.
And if you did these 10 exercises because you were in a certain category, that would supposedly fix your back up and posture and all this kind of stuff. But it was really, he was trendy for a while there, but it was nonsense, basically. If you look at the book, it's a joke.
Yeah.
But yet there's a couple of Egoscue clinics. There's still one here in Palm Beach Gardens. Some people go to that have back problems, but you can't weigh yourself with a toaster, and that's what they were probably trying to do pretty much there. So.
Now, are you currently running a facility of your own, or are you?
No. I work at a private country club. In fact, where Jack Nicklaus lives, and I've been there for 15 years. And I'm retiring in June. I'm retiring in 6 weeks. So.
Wow!
Congratulations.
Yeah.
And
I'm 70 years old, and I've had enough.
And you're not the first person to say those things. I'm not sure if you know Jim Bryan.
I've heard the name. Yeah.
Yeah. So he's in same place. He and I have been friends for a while. He's based down in Florida as well, and he's a advocate of this style of training, and he's been kind enough to share a lot of stuff with me over the years. But I've asked him many times to be on the podcast, and he's like, I don't have anything I want to talk about. He's like, he knows I have some good people coming, and he's like, I just don't want to talk about it anymore.
Yeah. Well, as far as the back machine goes, Jones did a lot of testing of people. He took a long time to develop that machine. It started with 14 years. I think it cost me $8 million. And he built, I think, 3,000 prototypes. So he wasn't easily satisfied. But when he finally came out with his final product, supposedly in 1986, he had tested 10,000 people in the process, anybody off the street. And he came to the conclusion that 99.9% of the people on the planet were in a state of disuse atrophy, chronic disuse atrophy, basically claiming that they had never used those muscles. And he tested football players and weightlifters and professional rowers, people that supposedly or should be strong in those muscle groups. So he concluded that the problem in terms of exercise and chronic low back pain related to the fact that the lumbar extensor muscles were the weak link. Whereas before that, every doctor, I've had 2 operations myself, every doctor I went to told me, the moment you said that I got a back problem, they said, well, strengthen your stomach. And that's about as dumb as walking in with a bicep problem. And the guy said, well, strengthen your triceps. So it just made no sense to me. And Jones, didn't steer in that direction. He always let the chips fall where they may, type of thing. So he concluded that the problem with backs is a weak back muscle, not a weak stomach. And when he lectured to doctors that I heard a number of times, orthopedics, etc., he said that strength in the stomach muscles has nothing to do with low back problems, nothing. And then he would explain his little ideas. So that made sense to me.
Yeah.
It always made sense, and if it didn't, he would explain it until it made sense. Without trying to brainwash you, he was always interesting in that regard.
Yeah.
So then, not only did people have to do some kind of movement that extended the spine, and there was some equipment out there before that. His original Nautilus machine was the premier one, and so of course Cybex and all the others copied it. But that wasn't good enough. Basically, his Medix machine did one thing differently in the fact that it prevented the pelvis from rotating. Jones tested a number of people that had done traditional exercise on machines or otherwise, Roman chairs, etc., for years, and people that should have strong backs, and they were all pitiful with a capital P. And so he concluded, even with this Nautilus machine, that it really didn't get or have a meaningful effect on the lumbar extensors. That it basically strengthened and affected the hip muscles, hamstrings, and rear end more than it did the lumbar extensors. So by preventing the pelvis from rotating, he got at the muscles he was, that he thought was the weak link. In the beginning, he didn't know. He wanted to isolate muscle function, and that's where he started with. And it just happened that it was pretty necessary for accessing the strength of those muscles. So he lost out on that to some extent.
Do you think you could compare it to, say, like the effects that a bench press has on the chest, right? That you're actually, the triceps and the deltoids are working a little bit harder than the pecs.
Yeah. Well, he assumed that originally with his Nautilus machine, and he made quite a few statements about that the glutes and hamstrings and low back are all closely connected. And he thought that in that extension movement that the weak link, the lower back, or the smallest muscles in that group would somehow get a benefit. And that seems to be logical. But when he kept developing equipment and stuff like that, he found out that they got no benefit at all. Some people had very strong, they could lift very heavy weights with the Nautilus machine. Jim Flanagan being one of them. Jim was using I think an 850-pound weight stack with two 200-pound men standing on top of it or something. It was a 450-pound weight stack with two 200-pound men standing on top. So a total theoretically of 850 pounds. And I saw Jim do that one day, and he did it in good form. And I thought, all right, this guy's a gorilla, because I had that machine in my gym and it had, I think, about a 250-pound weight stack on, and no one ever got close to it. It was tough. Yeah. But so Jim, we thought, was pretty strong, and he was strong somewhere. He's a big man anyway, but it ended up to be his rear end was strong, and his hamstrings were strong. And when they finally put him on the Med-X machine, they tested him without knowing, what kind of strength he produced there. They assumed that he was probably the strongest guy they'd ever seen. So they assumed his strength curve was going to be terrific on that thing. And it turned out, once they got norms going and stuff like that Jim's strength was actually pitiful. It was terrible. Yeah, I think he used the machine once every 2 weeks for a period of, I think, 11 weeks. So he did the machine about 5 or 6 times. And then they retested him, and he had gained 1,460%, which is he was 15 times stronger. Now, if you watch him lift 850 pounds in good form, and you say, well, I can make that guy 15 times stronger if he comes over and uses my machine once every 2 weeks, you'd bet your house that he couldn't do it.
Yeah.
But that was the state of his back when he first entered the Med-X machine. He was in naturally.
That's amazing.
That result, unless you were naturally.
But Gary, I have to say,
those kind of things were mind-boggling to everybody.
Yeah.
Because they've never seen explosive results like that. And it wasn't because the machine was so fantastic. It was just that those muscles had never been accessed. So, and the way to access them was by preventing the pelvis from rotating.
Awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's still not believed today. You look at these functional trainers, and what the hell have they got for low back exercise? And they keep on talking about the core. And I asked them, I said, of the 3 theoretical muscles that comprise the core, which one's the most important? You got the abdominal obliques and the lumbar extensors. And of course, the lumbar extension, nobody suffers from abdominal problems or oblique problems.
Right.
That problem, yes. So, you ask them, well, what exercises do you have? And, well, they can name 100 abdominal exercises, but they only name 1 or 2 of, back extension type things, or the theoretical will get the back. And so they really have nothing. They have nothing.
Yeah.
And they keep referring to this other idiot Canadian named Stuart McGill. I think John probably mentioned him a few times. He's got a PhD, I think, and John went up and interviewed him.
Yeah, no, I'm very familiar with McGill.
Very big books about spinal mechanics, and he's supposed to be an international expert. And we've got about five performance trainers at our gym that quote him, and they think he's God and everything else. I stood up at one meeting, I got mad, and I said, well, in Canada, this guy is kind of considered a joke, and they couldn't believe it I said that. And again, from John's interview and reading the books, he's anti-seated exercise, he's anti-extension exercise, and he's anti-machine. So those are 3 things that he won't even mention a Med-X machine.
Right.
He thinks it's just a joke. And if he'd ever read one of Arthur Jones's articles in one of the magazines he put in as I think it was called was an advertisement in the magazine, 28-page advertisement, when Jones first got the thing developed, where he looked at spinal mechanics, how does the back move, and Jones found out that in extension, the space for discs was much greater than in any other position. And if Stuart McGill ever read that, that's all he would have to read. He wouldn't have to write these 500-page books about bullshit. According to John, and I've never met Stuart McGill, and I respect anyone in the field, finding have a different opinion. But when John heard him say that, well, what's wrong with the medics? Have you ever heard of medics and Arthur Jones? He said, extensions tend to, they say, herniate discs, I believe. And he said rotational exercises delaminate things. So John, I think, in his podcast with you guys, said that he called Dr. Fulton, who's a friend of mine up in Daytona Beach here, shortly after, and he said, Doc, what do you think of this? And Fulton said, that's just absolute nonsense. I've looked at 30,000 patients over a 40-year period of time, and we treated them all with extensions,
right,
seated exercise, on machines, and he said, I've never delaminated a damn thing, and I've never herniated a disc.
Just to interject, Gary, Dr. Fulton's name rings a bell. Was he not like the orthopedic doctor working for either Nautilus or MedX?
Yeah, he was the orthopedic representative for both companies.
Okay.
And worked side by side with Arthur Jones for about 30 years, 25, 30 years.
So, I mean, he must have seen thousands of patients working with that lumbar MedX machine.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And he's totally sold on it. I was up at his place 3 or 4 months ago and talking to him, and we had him. I flew him down to Venezuela 4 times when I was down there to talk to my members when I owned my gym only, and then when I opened up a medics rehab center down there with that big back machine.
Right.
I had him come down 2 or 3 more times to speak to medical doctors.
Yeah.
To try to get things promoted, but I was not smart enough to realize that the country was falling apart and the healthcare system didn't exist or didn't work. So it was a wrong place at the wrong time type of thing. But
yeah.
But Fulton's big on that machine, and he's as an orthopedic surgeon, he has not operated on anyone for about probably 30 years.
Wow.
He believes in exercise, and his approach is this: you walk in there with a knee problem or neck problem or back problem, and he says, let's do 4 months of exercise, and then we'll decide what to do with you, which is pretty refreshing.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Very active business,
Yeah, that's wonderful.
I'm paraphrasing here, but I mean, would you? It seems like what you were basically saying in your book is that specifically the MedX lumbar extension machine had the potential to disrupt a potentially $80 billion low back pain industry. Does that sound accurate?
Oh, that's absolutely true. I asked, MedX as a company kind of became dysfunctional. A couple of idiots took it over and ruined the whole thing, just downgraded everything, and they were in for the money and et cetera, et cetera. And they just took it in a direction that Jones would never have taken. But I asked Dr. Fulton when the MedX started to crumble, I said, well, what's going on? I said, why was this machine rejected by the medical community, specifically orthopedic? And he told me, he said, it's simple. He said, it would have put us out of business.
Yeah.
And I asked another orthopedic the same thing that was into MedX, and he said exactly the same thing. He said it would have put us out of business. So it was a threat. And then when I was up to see Dr. Fulton about 3 or 4 months ago, I asked him again. I said, why the hell did this thing just cave in? And he told me the same thing. And then he said, I'll tell you a story, and this might be interesting. He said, when Arthur Jones passed away, he became the kind of interim CEO or president of MedX. Volunteered to do that for a bit. And he said one morning I was up at the University of Florida preparing for a day of lectures. And he said I had a pretty full schedule. And he said about 9 o'clock that morning, a group of suits came up to me. That's how he described it. Four men came up in suits and said, Dr. Fulton, we'd like to speak with you. And Fulton said, well, I'd love to, but I don't have the time at the moment. I got a full day. He said, maybe at the end of the day we can get together and have a chat. So they did at the end of the day. And the spokesman for this group looked him right in the face. He said, Dr. Fulton, we've listened to your lectures. We know all about the MedX machine. The machine had been out there probably 10 or 12 years at that point. And he said, we are going to do everything in our power to block the further success of this machine. anyone would even say that to him. Yeah, you just don't say that to somebody. And then he said, I felt like punching this guy in the face, but he said, I looked him straight in the eye, and I said, and who the hell are you? That's what he said to me. He was really steaming. And he said, and who the hell are you? And this guy happened to be the CEO or president or chairman or whatever of the National Physical Therapy Association of the United States. He was the head guy.
That's frightening.
So and Fulton said within 3 or 4 months he went to the government, and anybody that used that machine in a rehab setting, insurance setting, was no longer reimbursed by Medicare. He shut the whole damn thing down. And suddenly, more than 1,000 clinics across the country ended up to be maybe 100. If you can find a piece now.
Gary, was this publicized anywhere?
All politics.
Do you know of any newspaper or anywhere where this was published, or like the story was investigated?
No, I don't. Just other than that story for Dr. Fulton. I'm sure somebody wrote something about that, but maybe they just kept it a secret and it was all done under the ground. I don't know.
Yeah, it's kind of ridiculous. What's crazy is you'd think that if any community that was going to embrace it, it would be these guys, right? Why not get the best technology available to do their job and assist them in doing their job? Then, instead of fight it and try to go the old route with the ineffective body weight stuff and rubber bands and more pills or whatever.
Well, you'd think so, because as a physical therapist, if this thing works as well as you say it works, again, the statistics are right there. 80% of people have a reduction in pain perception. 33 become pain-free after 12-week protocol. You'd think that would make you as a physical therapist or you as a medical doctor look pretty good.
Yeah.
I go to this guy for facts and I'm cured. I'm better.
For sure.
But it only costs let's say $2,500. So that's what was being billed by insurance companies or two insurance companies. But $2,500 for a 12-week protocol, and the back operation might be $100,000, $120,000.
Right.
So why the hell make $2,500 when you can make 25? Whatever it is.
Yeah, crazy.
So that's the feeling. And money talks, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Startling.
So you had said in your email there was a couple different topics that you wanted to discuss. Movement speed and different various things. I would love to hear your thoughts on any of those things that you can just wax along.
I think I wrote an article recently, and I didn't publish it at all. I think I sent you a copy of it. We have a bunch of performance trainers in our gym, and of course, performance trainers eventually, with their people, get into power production. They think that power is a big thing. In fact, one of the guys in our place has 2 master's degrees, and he kind of became the spokesman for the entire staff in terms of educating us with his brilliance and all this bullshit. And anyway, he was every time we had a staff meeting, he would have an hour or a half an hour to tell us what he knew about everything. And he started talking about power one day, and he said that the biggest problem I work with is an older population, pretty much 70-year-olds, 80-year-olds, even 90s.
Sure.
And he said the biggest problem with older people is lack of power. They lose power. And I'm thinking, where the hell is that coming from? We lose eyesight, we lose our hearing, we lose our teeth, and we lose muscle mass, and power probably too, but it's not significant. So anyway, I didn't know where the hell this guy was coming from. And it basically talked about the ability to deliver a movement quickly. And so, of course, they believe that in order to train for power, you've got to do explosive movements. And that's absolutely asinine. I don't care who you are and what age you are. It's a stupid damn thing to do because the forces are so high. And yet these guys so they started training people, some of them, that they thought were candidates. And eventually it spread a little bit. Too many people were candidates. It was explosive training. We were trained for power today because a lot of these people were golfers.
Sure.
Tennis players or something. So, sold, and I go, oh, yeah, that sounds good. And they can, of course, rationalize any of their stupidity. But no matter how you look at it, the forces are so bloody high with fast movement that I wouldn't give it to a dead dog, So, I told them that. I mean, you can kill somebody doing that stuff. And Jones proved it. I saw, I don't know how many times with his force plate experiment that I explained in my books there, where you put somebody on a force plate and have them do slow repetitions and have them do fast repetitions, and then he started doing some jumping stuff impact stuff, and the forces are just astronomical. And the first time I saw it, I was a runner at the time. I ran about 25,000 miles in 15 years, and I should have quit running the first time I saw that damn experiment. I was too stupid to continue, but
Yeah,
I had a
it's
couple
funny.
of operations, and I did quit.
I see this kind of stuff a lot because, as you were saying, the people don't understand the whole concept of improving their strength as much as possible to allow them to increase force production and to do that in a safe fashion, like as you're saying, slowing it down. And it sort of makes perfect sense because obviously, in order to get stronger, you need to lift heavier weights. And obviously, when you lift heavier weights, they're going to move slower no matter what. The heavier they get, the slower they're going to move. I try to explain that to people, even if you're, not a fan of, say, powerlifting, for instance. You go to a powerlifting meet and you watch a guy make a world record attempt at the bench press. These days, they're, bench pressing, 800, 900, 1,000 pounds. I said, you watch a guy bench press 900 pounds. It takes him 20 seconds just to lower the barbell to the bottom position. You can't just drop 900 pounds on your chest, and then bounce it and try to blast it off. It doesn't happen. And so even those guys who are, supposedly the big, strong guys, they're moving very slow, even though they're exploding, right? Their intention is to explode, but they don't move that bar fast. It's not going to happen. So, it's ridiculous.
But, from the perspective of the performance trainers that are advocating this kind of stupidity, basically it's easier for them to sell their approach than us to sell our approach, because you say you got to explain it, you got to go here, you got to go there, and in the end it doesn't sound as easy or as logical as what they advocate, which is, hey, you want to be fully prepared for your power sport like football, you got to prepare in the gym, you got to do explosive stuff in the gym, so when you get to the field, you be ready, totally prepared. Whereas our approach is that you can gain power through very, very slow movement, and that's been proven in research. And then take your new strength and power, whatever, out to the field, and then plug it into your skills.
Exactly.
And, that doesn't sound it sounds like a stupid way to do it, but it's actually a very safe and productive way to do it. So.
We talk a lot about how people like sparkly new things, and they like the easy answers. So, like we just had a manager in a high intensity training facility on with us last week, and we kind of were talking about how people will gravitate naturally toward the trainer with the biggest muscles or who looks the most fit. But the question we had is would they have a training plan to help you become a taller person, right? It's not possible, right? Because the biggest, strongest person in the gym, chances are they could do any program and they'd still be, the biggest, strongest person in the gym because genetically they're just predisposed to be that type of person.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Arthur used to describe it. He said that people get results in spite of their training.
Yes.
He said, not because of their training.
Yeah.
Liam's just shaking his head.
I see it all the time, of course. I've been doing this stuff a long time myself, but one of my pet peeves with this group that you're talking about, these performance guys or the quote unquote functional movement guys, what never makes sense to me, and one of the sort of battle cries of these functional training guys is, well, we need to train movements, not muscles, right? They say that all the time. Let's train, and I always say, well, there is no movement without your muscles, so you have to train the muscles to create the movement, right? The whole statement makes no sense. Yeah, and they don't get it. They think that, no, we don't want to train the muscles. We want to train the movement. What does that mean, right? So that's one of my sort of pet peeves with those
when
guys.
I first heard that, and I heard exactly the same thing as you did there, when they said, well, we're training movement, I thought, well, movement training is skill training. I said, you want to train movement, go to your tennis professional, go to your golf professional, learn how to move.
Yeah.
And so they're mixing the two of them up, and as I just explained in my book there about specificity and stuff, it just doesn't work. You can do it, and people love it. I mean, the golfing population here, I don't want to just do exercise. I want to do golf exercise. So that's why they grab a pulley station. They don't get on individual machines. They've got a pulley station, and they try to replicate the golf swing or the tennis swing.
Yeah, right.
Something, and they think, oh man, this is perfect because I'm a golfer. And I just keep on telling them, it's a great way to screw up your skill.
Yes.
It's a harder sell from our perspective than it is from, if you walk in and say, I'm a hockey player. Okay, let's go to the police station and replicate hockey. And everyone's in love
actually worked for several years, Gary, just by interesting coincidence, in almost the exact same population as yourself. I spent several years up until only about last April working in a private members-only country club with a very large older population and with lots of golfers, lots of tennis players, exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And so I've literally had those same encounters and watched them, again and again.
Well, so Gary, you say it's a tough sell. It's a tough sell to, tell people, no, don't do your golf swing in the weight room. Let's just lift heavy weights instead. But let's try anyway. And I think a good way to do that, and I'm pulling again from your book, Golf Performance Training, is explaining to people the 4 stages of motor learning. I think because when people understand why they're doing a thing, it will make them more likely to do that thing. Can you take us through that a little bit?
Well, the skill training has to be separated from strength training. It's totally different. Specificity is specificity, and if you do something that looks like or feels like a golf swing, that's not good enough. In fact, the closer it is like a golf swing, the worse off you are, because it can interfere with the nervous system sensations. If I'm used to swinging a 4-ounce golf club at my driver, and I suddenly take, let's say, a 5-pound weight and swing it, that's different. If I swing a 7-ounce weight golf club or so as some kind of a preparation for golf, first of all, what 7 ounces is going to do? It's closer to the 4 ounces I normally use. And the closer you get to it, the more confusion there is in the nervous system. It senses that gee, something feels a little bit different here. So the channels are probably trying to figure out where to go. And the other thing is how much will 7 ounces do for my strength? Maybe the muscles I'm using are capable of lifting 300 pounds, and I got 7 ounces there. So it's like putting a pencil in your hand and saying, hey, hope you get a bicep pretty soon. This isn't going to work. And then, so there's also, I got a guy that I've trained for about 10 years. He's a golf nut. And I don't know how many times I've told this guy to not go to the pulley station and pull golf. And I don't know how many times the very next day he's at the damn pulley station working on his backswing or his follow through or some nonsense. And it drove me to the point I don't even talk to the guy anymore. I just want to be that stupid and then be that stupid. And actually, when I was in college, I did the same mistake. I did the same mistake for about 10 years. I followed Gary Player's books. And Gary Player was one of my heroes. He was my size, and he was one of the only guys out there, the 2 at the time, that lifted weights at all. So I got into his philosophy and his books and his exercises. And I swung dumbbells and did some stuff that he did in his book, thinking that was the way to go. And I've met Gary Player since and challenged him a couple of times on his philosophy because I think it's wrong, period.
Yeah.
Now he became very, very good, and I can't question that. But I think his approach to exercise was a little too much. Plus, he's a fanatic about things, very strong opinions about all sorts of stuff. And he doesn't do 10 push-ups. He does 10,000 push-ups, and then he says, "How many can you do?" I said, Gary, if you can do 10,000, then find a way to make them harder.
Yes.
So you can't do 10,000. Anyway, all that stuff.
That's funny.
But I don't know whether that answers your question or not. But Arthur's approach was this, and he wrote that in that article, Specificity and Strength Training, the Facts and Fables, I think it was called, something like that. And that's basically what my golf book is based on, is that article. And the article is very clear. And Arthur said, identify the muscles you need for your sport, shoulders, back, whatever, and it usually ends up to be the major muscle groups, the big ones that create power. And he said, then strengthen those muscles independent of how you're going to use them. Make your triceps stronger, make your upper back stronger, make your shoulders stronger, and then take that new strength, those new tools you have, and go up to the practice facility and plug them into your sport. Play baseball, play golf, practice golf, tennis, whatever. And that was his approach, and it's just not very attractive to someone that really wants to get into golf.
Yeah, kind of the analogy that I use sometimes is the idea that your muscles are the engine. Like if you think of the car analogy. So I said, if I give you a bigger engine through the strength training, and we know your engine is bigger, that means when you step on the gas, you're going to go further. But I said it doesn't make you a better driver. right? You're not a better car driver unless you practice driving the car. So I said, just the fact that you've got stronger is a separate thing from, like you're saying, applying to the specific skills. You take that bigger engine, and now you go out to the racetrack and you actually practice the skill of driving or the skill of baseball or whatever. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So it's perfect. I mean, I think I'm probably paraphrasing Arthur myself with the idea of that when you practice, when you add weight to a skill, you get a new skill, and then you keep on adding weight, and then it just becomes exercise, right?
Yeah.
Well, so on the flip side, Gary, I mean, say hypothetically somebody comes to you and he's what you say you retire in like 6 weeks. Somebody's like, okay, Gary's around for 6 more weeks. I want to soak in all the knowledge I can get from him. I want to learn how to strength train the right way for golf. What would you have this person doing?
Read my book. I mean, it's everything I would say to them is in that book.
Right.
So I would just say, hey, let's sit down, look at, let's identify what muscles you use. Okay, this movement requires deltoids and this upper back and your weight shift. You need the legs. I asked Nicholas one time. I said, where's the source of power come from in the golf swing? And I was fortunate to train Jack a number of times, and including up till last year. But he said, hey, from the ground up. That's all. And Nicholas has got some big legs on. And he's not a big man. He's not a tall man, but he generated all this power through his legs. But I would sit down and identify, okay, these are the muscles we really want to focus on. Then there's a couple of peripheral ones, maybe the forearms and a few other specific ones for your sport. And then go after those, explain the specificity idea as well, that, hey, we're going to keep them separated. We're going to build muscles, stronger muscles, and then have you go out and play with those stronger muscles. And that's the way to go. You won't interfere with your skill. There's an adaptation period, obviously, because your body's changing. And that's one thing that the PGA Tour guys basically haven't got enough patience to understand either. It may take, I don't know how many weeks or months to adapt to this new body you're building, etc. And some of them, think that, and they're so anal about if they shoot like a 76 today, which is a bad score for them, the first thing they blame is the strength training. Well, yeah, there's an adaptation period where you may have a little difficulty, but the long term, there's no doubt that you're going to be a better athlete. That's what I always said. That stronger athlete is a better athlete short of checkers and chess. And that's, but golfers it's a high skill sport, and strength may not be a key issue in that sport, but it certainly is a fact. If you want to reach your potential, you better fill in that 5 or 10% that strength represents. So.
Yeah, no, that's a good idea. I have actually, with the golfers I've worked with, I've had them be very excited to find that they've added, 10 or 15 or 20 yards, to their certain shots, and having to actually back off on a club or whatever, and being excited about it because, wow, I'm suddenly hitting further with, after a few months of doing this stuff. And I'm like, yeah, it's not a surprise, right? As we discussed. Yeah. So that's awesome.
Yeah. One thing too, we have the TPI program, the Nautilus Performance Institute program in our gym, and I've been, I've refused to take part in it. I think it's a pile of shit, and that's why I won't participate in it. But we have several. One guy's a master's degree in that stuff, and 2 or 3 levels of whatever he's got,
sure.
And 2 or 3 other guys are certified in that. But anyway, I look at what they do, and some of the people that I'm training, who are golfers, will look over and say, well, what the hell are they doing over there? And I look over, and you can't tell what the hell they're doing, to tell you the truth. They're crawling on the floor or doing some stupid ass thing, and learning some unrelated skill, useless skill.
Yeah.
So I tell them, well, if you want to go do the golf program, you can do it. But I look at what they do, and they're totally anti-machine. They will never use a machine. They never have in 5 or 6 years. And they rarely even use dumbbells. They go to the TRX straps, which is garbage, and all sorts of other, rubber bands, and just, it's like saying, hey, I'm going to make you the best athlete that you can be. Just take this rubber band and go in the corner and do those 10 little exercises I gave you, and you'll be at your strength potential. It isn't even close. I mean, they could, instead of spending an hour with some guy doing stupid stuff, they could spend 20 minutes strengthening just 8 major muscle groups, and they get probably a 10-fold increase in what the hell they do. So it really makes me sick, because I see some stuff that I can't even recognize. I don't know what they're doing over there. It's just nonsense.
That's wow, yeah.
It's laughable. It's laughable. Yet the public, these guys that have money, they'll just spend it. I want to be in the golf program.
So what?
And I've heard the instructor say, hey, are you getting any better? And they go, well, I'm still not driving it too far. And everything depends on what they shot yesterday, pretty much.
Right.
So if the guy shot good, he said, oh, the golf program terrific. It's really helped me out. It's nonsense.
Now, you had one of the things you mentioned you wanted to talk about was speed of movement during exercise. So maybe you can talk to us about that.
Well, slower the better. There's no doubt. I mean, you can take anybody in a gym. I think I mentioned this. Our job's pretty easy. Walk in any gym in this country, and I don't care whether it's a well-supervised gym, and just get everyone to go slower than they're going at the moment. Get the bullhorn out and say, slow down, and if everyone obeyed, probably the results in this country would triple in a short period of time. And it's just logical because, as you know yourself, if you go slow down from your current speed, even if it's pretty good form, it makes the weight feel heavier, and the body senses that. And with that sensation, you get a stimulation and say, oh, geez, if we're going to be doing this slow or this heavy, however it feels, then we better gear up and get stronger for that performance. So it just absolutely makes sense. And then from the perspective of injury prevention, it just makes triple sense. You keep the forces low. If you got 60 pounds in your hand, all you need is 61 units of effort to lift 60 pounds of weight. So it just keeps the forces at a low level and makes the muscle feel the weight all the way through the movement. And it depends what tool you have in your hand. Or sometimes a barbell in certain positions is not effective because of gravity and leverage and all that kind of stuff. But in general, it's more productive. Slower is more productive than fast in every situation, and it protects you from injury better in every situation. And there's absolutely no need to ever move quickly in a gym. And I remember I had a discussion with a couple of performance guys about 2 months ago, and they said, well, how the hell are you going to produce power if you don't demonstrate it on the floor? And I said, well, you produce power in 3 different ways. They thought they had me cornered. And I said, it's very, very simple. I said, increase your skill, increase your strength, and reduce your body fat. That's it. That's all you can do.
I like it.
That was an interesting piece from your book. I think it was just a small bullet point, but something that I hadn't really looked into before. And you talked about how decreasing your body fat percentage can decrease friction during muscle contraction.
Yeah. If you got a big arm that hasn't got much muscle in it, you probably certainly can't flex it or move it as quickly as you can because you got all the fat cells in between the muscle cells that say producing more friction when you do move. So I would guarantee, and I don't know if there's any research behind this, but I'm sure it exists. If you had a guy that was 15% body fat and reduced him down to 11 or something like that, without any other changes, and that's hard to do as well, he would definitely, he has to be faster.
Yeah, I don't know if you know Tom Kelso. He's another guy we had on. He's a longtime effective, advocate of this type of training. And, he mentions the same kind of thing. If you want to go faster, he says the exact same thing. Get stronger, lose your body fat, and practice running fast or whatever it is you're trying to do. But he says those exact same 3 things: lower your body fat, increase your strength, and practice the skill. So yeah, he's right. He's right there with you. And do you know Bob Sikora from MedX?
I've heard the name, yeah.
Yeah, so we had him on, and he echoes your sentiment about the speed of movement, and he had a great point, which he said, people come up to him all the time and say, well, why are you going slow like that? And he said, because it's safer, right? And and number one, he said nobody will ever argue that point, and Jesse and I have already found that to be true in the gym. When we start to recommend these speeds, you can make up all kinds of reasons, but if you just use safety as the number one reason, no one's going to argue safety most of the time. You just go, hey, we do this because it's safe, and nobody's going to argue with that. Oh, it's safe. Okay, well, let's try it.
On the other side of safety, that's a great point. But besides safety, you're talking about getting strength gains and performance increases, etc. I used to tell people in my gym that the opposite. They think if you go fast in the gym, you'll be fast on the field. And so I came up with an opposite thing, because Jones always said slower is better, both from a safety perspective, as you described, but also also from a performance perspective, I used to tell people, I believe that the slower you go in a gym, the faster you'll be on the field. And of course, performance trainers can't sink into that skull, so
Right.
they don't.
But I like that idea though. I recently did a little bout myself, just for a personal experiment. I recently did a little bout of training in the sort of quote unquote super slow fashion, the 10 seconds up, 10 seconds down.
Yeah.
And I had never done it for any length of time. I'd only used it as a sort of occasional tool, but I spent about 5 or 6 weeks doing it, and I put on 3 pounds of muscle myself in that time.
Yeah.
I was pretty happy with it, and I was training 2 times a week, 20 minutes, about 10 exercises, total failure, and every set was basically approximately 10 seconds up, 10 seconds down until I couldn't budge. And I've been doing this a long time. Say again?
I don't think it could be sustained. I think you got to do it for, like you said, 4 or 5 weeks, 6 weeks or something, and then lay off. It's brutally hard. You get to the point where you don't even want to go to the gym. You're gonna vomit, or it's just really, really tough.
It is.
The whole darn thing.
I know. I remember somebody is telling me, because I've been had the good fortune to spend some time with Jim Flanagan myself, and somebody else was telling me the same thing, that they had Flanagan doing the super slow for a little while, and he had tremendous results with it himself. He got much stronger, but he also, like just as you had said, he just don't want to do it anymore after a while. It's very mentally challenging.
And then I also wanted to mention something about and I mentioned this in my last 2 books anyway, about some of the research Arthur Jones did with once he developed the machines that isolated muscle function. Because I remember Arthur clearly saying, he said, when I say something about a muscle, it's going to be 100% of that muscle, not 96, not 94, not 83, 100. So he spent all that time trying to isolate the quadriceps and the neck extensors and lumbar extensions. And when he finally got a lot of that, his machines perfected, let's say, he did some interesting experiments that produced some interesting physiology, and of course wrote about it, and in such an excited way that I think he got everyone excited about it, and thought it might be something very important in terms of the future of exercise. And one of the things was the muscles' response to exercise, whether it was specific or general. And I thought that I'd never heard of that, where he basically would give you a full range strength test. He test you through 8 different angle static testing. And of course, static testing was the only way to test. You can't test dynamically, and he proved that. But so he did a reading and something, he'd join the dots, produce some kind of strength curve, a fresh strength curve. And then he would give you a partial exercise. It usually was a half the range of motion. So leg extension you do from halfway up to the top, or from the bottom to halfway up. And then immediately after that partial range exercise, you do a full range test to see what effect that partial range exercise had on your strength.
Yeah.
And he found in different with the quadriceps versus the lumbar extensions, etc. It was something always around 70 to 80% of people had a specific response to exercise, and it seems to make sense. Where you worked, in terms of the work zone, you got fatigue, and if you did it over a period of time and just did a partial range of motion in that range, you got a result in that range of motion. And then where you did no work, you got no fatigue as a result of a single exercise, or no results because you didn't work in that zone. That seems to make sense.
Sure.
But he came across the fact that around 20% of people, depending on the machine again, had a general response. Whether they worked this half of the range or the other half of the range, they got a full range result. And full range fatigue. They had fatigue equal in where they did nothing as opposed to where they did something. And that was fascinating to me.
Yeah.
And then, and this was never published, I think, but remember he said, and he tested about 10,000 people. He said we also came across a third category that he called an R type. He called one S type, G type, specific general.
Yeah.
And then he came across an R type, which was a reverse. And these people, if they worked in one half of the range of motion, they got no fatigue and no results in that half of the range of motion. They only got results where they did nothing.
Wow, I never heard about that particular one. I never heard about the R. I heard about the S and the G.
Out of 10,000 people, he said he lectured one day, threw this in as a thing to get us thinking a little bit. He said we came across about 20 people that were like 10,000, 20 people. And he said, we tested them and tested them and tested them again. This part of the range, that part of the range, this condition, that condition. And he said, I have no idea how the hell they're wired up, but they are different than us.
Yeah, amazing.
So, yeah. So, in reference to applying that kind of information, you assume that most people are specific in their response to exercise. So you want to make sure somebody goes through a full range of motion when they're doing any exercise.
Sure.
Especially if there's a good source of resistance throughout that range of motion. And then, of course, in rehab, if someone can only move their limb through 10 degrees and they're a general type, which you may find out, then they'll get a full range response, which is pretty exciting. So
yeah.
There's some applications to that.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's fascinating. I'd never heard of the R type, but that's it'd be interesting if you found one.
The other thing was the muscle fiber type work that he did with that equipment. Once you got it developed, he would basically give you a full range strength test, and then work you to exhaustion through that full range, and then give you another full range strength test to see what effect that particular exercise had on your strength level.
Right.
And he concluded after measuring supposedly 10,000 people that on average, an average muscle with an average mix of fast twitch and slow twitch fibers, which most of us have, loses about 2% strength per repetition. And therefore, if you did 10 reps with a certain weight and you measure your strength before and after, you'd be about 20% down, 18, 20, 21, etc. And most people were like that. But then he came across some really freakish people, and it led him to believe, and that was he was criticized with his Nautilus stuff that one shoe fits everybody. And most people got good results with his system, but a lot of people didn't. When I say a lot, low percentage, and he couldn't figure it out. He thought, well, genetically they must be a little different. But with muscle fiber typing, he got some answers at least. And so if, let's say you did, you lost, again, on average, 2% strength per repetition. He came across a guy, and Joe Cerulli, and I think you've probably heard that name.
Absolutely, yeah.
Joe ran a fitness center. Ran a fitness center in Gainesville. It was
Sure.
Arthur's biggest purchaser of equipment. But Joe was an Italian guy, and he was always about 5'10" or so, and fairly muscular. Looked pretty good shape. And he happened to be a fast twitch guy, and especially on the low back machine. And I remember watching him one time in an experiment. They tested his strength. He did 4 repetitions of a weight for exercise, a total of 32 seconds of exercise, 4 repetitions, and he could no longer continue. And they measured his strength after he lost, I think it was around 80% of his strength.
Wow.
4 repetitions. So, and Jones came across a few guys that lost as much as 50% of their strength per repetition. Not 2, 50.
Yeah, amazing.
So they take the test and they couldn't even begin the exercise because they were dead, So, anyway, with Cerulli, he measured Joe about 100 times, and he knew his recovery pattern for that particular muscle. And Jones would just look at his watch. He said, well, it's about 3.5 hours after he did the exercise. He'll still be 78% down in strength. And it took Joe almost 3 weeks to recover from 32 seconds of exercise in terms of his muscles to recover and get back to where they were when he walked in the door.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Which is pretty interesting stuff.
It is. It's fascinating.
And you look at him and you say, well, the guy's in pretty good shape, but let's go 3 times a week and give him this and that. Well, that would probably kill him.
Yeah. And, it's funny because I've had some guys like that. I had a guy recently, he was a football player. He was actually a member at the country club. And we ended up training only once a week for 30 minutes. And he was very, very fast twitch, mesomorphic.
Yeah.
So he was getting tremendous response from this extremely small dose. And he was ecstatic about it. And he was getting bigger. And he was actually recovering from cancer and had a lot of surgery and stuff chopped off, and he had lost a lot of muscle. And in a very short time, we got him. I mean, he was in his 40s now. He had been a college football player. He was just as strong as he was in college, if not stronger, and he was ecstatic. And obviously training a lot less.
Dr. Jones was the same way. He talked about that in his own development. That he said in the end that he thinks he could have gotten better results than he did by just training once a week.
Right.
So
I've noticed Clarence Bass has been. I don't know. I'm sure you know that name.
In fact, I had some conversations with Clarence as well through email.
Yeah.
He commented on one of my books one time, again through John Turner. Turned me on to him, and he wrote me some nice stuff, and he was quite a gentleman in terms of his approach, and he's a big advocate of high intensity training as well.
Yeah, and he's recently, I mean, he's in his 70s, if not 80s now, but he has been talking about saying that he's down to training one strength session a week, and he says, he wished he had started doing it 30 years ago, just once a week.
Yeah.
He does one sort of very intense interval sort of conditioning session, if you will, and one just all out strength training session. And that's it. So just 2 workouts a week with 2 or 3 days off in between each one, but only actually one strength session every 7 days. And he thinks he might have been able to be more successful if he had started doing it a long time ago.
Yeah, it's hard to convince somebody that's doing more than that though to cut down, because they all think they're going to lose something.
I know.
So unless you're down their throat every time they work out, they probably will not get a good result with less training, because they're all addicted to 6 days a week or whatever.
Yeah.
So, another thing that was interesting is that on the other end, the fast twitch guy, Jones had a guy come in who was a professor at the university, just an average-looking guy. He's about 6'2", probably weighed about 190 or so. And on and off exercise, they're not in particularly good shape, but didn't look horrible. And he tested him among his 10,000 tests, and he put a weight on for this guy the first time, and the guy went forever, kind of thing. He just kept going and going. Jones got so pissed off and bored with this guy, because most people lasted about 10 or 15 reps. And so he told this guy to, first of all, he found that the test was false. The guy didn't cooperate on the test, and because the test result was low, the weight he put in was low, and the guy could go for it forever. So Jones brought him back a second time, a third time, a fourth time, and every time he came in, this guy just kept going and going and going. Would never fatigue. He would just go forever. And so this guy actually showed up at our gym in Jupiter one day, and I was out of the blue. He came in with his dad. I guess his dad was in there. Anyway, I found out who he was, and so I went over and interviewed him, and actually wrote about this in my first book. His name was James Graves. And I said, did Arthur ever put you on that? It was a low back machine. Arthur ever put you on that machine one day to see really how far you could go? He said, oh, yeah. He said, I came in one day, and Arthur had steam coming out of his ears from seeing me. And and when you're in the big medical machine, you can't see the weight stack, so you don't know what the guy is putting on the weight stack.
Right.
So he said, Arthur bent way down, he said, and stuck it down there somewhere. And when he was coming up, he said, okay, boy. He said, let's see what you can do with this. And the guy said, I knew I was in trouble. So they took him down to the starting position, which is the flexion there. And you can hardly breathe in that position anyway. He said, okay, go, boom. And the guy said, it was so freaking heavy. He said, I could barely move the first repetition. I said, holy shit. So he got it up there and finished the first rep, and he went down the second rep. I said, how made you do? How would you do that day? He said, well, I did over 150 repetitions with a weight that I could barely lift once. And he said, I lasted, 45 minutes or whatever. And Jones was blowing his brains out trying to figure out what to do with this. And he turned around the country with Joe Cerulli, was the opposite.
Right.
Showed the difference.
That's awesome.
1 week here, 1 week there. And it was pretty interesting. And anyway, this guy ended up he did a lot of research for Jones at the University of Florida, and then eventually went up to University of Syracuse, I think, and did some interesting studies with the not professional rowers, but the crew team at the university with low backs. And he measured their strength, the whole team, and they averaged, I think they were 195 pounds, 6'3", and in really good shape. And everyone thought that rowers would have strong backs. And when they tested these guys, their backs was exactly the same as a normal guy in the street that did nothing.
Wow.
So the conclusion was that rowing had no effect on lumbar strength, which surprised a lot of people.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Got strong asses and strong hamstrings and no low back stuff. So.
But the genetic stuff is always going to be fascinating, although people don't want to accept, that where they lie in that chain. But yeah, I use that analogy quite a bit. Obviously Mike Menser used to talk about that, this broad expression of genetic potential, right? And he used to jokingly say that some guys are morons of recovery ability.
Yeah,
and that those guys you're talking about that can't train. They just can't train more than once every 10 days or something and expect to get results. And when you try to smush yourself into that standard Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or as you say, even 5 or 6 days a week, those guys are just destined. They're guaranteed to have suboptimal results.
Yeah, well, bodybuilding and that kind of stuff. Addiction is a social event, pretty much. I mean, they go there and all their friends are there, and they like that atmosphere, so they go. That's maybe all the friends that they have or will have. But anyway, that's beside the point. But the genetic stuff is good. Arthur used to always say, he said, you can't train a donkey for the Kentucky Derby, and that's basically what he said. Some people have it, some people don't. It's that simple, and most of us don't. In terms of being an elite athlete of some kind. So.
And over your time, did you actually spend time one-on-one with him, or in any sort of small settings, or did you just attend lectures? Or
well, I was invited by Jim Flanagan to come up and listen to him lecture once he got that Maddox machine developed. And other than that, I was at Nautilus a couple of times. I purchased machines and took them down to Venezuela. I had 36 machines down there in the end.
Wow.
And so I came up a few times, and I wasn't a big purchaser, but I was the only first gym in South America that had a full line of equipment. The Brazilian soccer team had a couple of pieces before I got there, but it wasn't a big deal for him. I figured this is another sale, but so then Jim and when I did go to Nautilus, I got glimpses of Arthur here and there, but never listened to him speak at all. And then one time Jim invited me to come up and listen to him lecture, and I just jumped on it. And I went for one lecture and stayed for 7. I stayed for a full week.
Wow.
And Jim and the company said, hey, just get out of this hotel, check in, and we'll pay your meals and we'll pay your telephone calls and just enjoy it. So they were pretty generous with that.
Yeah.
And I thought Arthur was going to kick me in the teeth a few times because he kept seeing me every damn day in there. But pretty much if he were interested, and he eventually found out that I was, and on his side pretty much, he was very very nice to me and always very educational. I'd ask him a question. He sometimes, even if he had some important guy with him, he'd excuse himself and sit down with me for 15 or 20 minutes just to answer that question. And he would get a little drawing board out and a pencil and a big piece of paper, and he'd draw a picture. And he sat there until he knew that I understood, which was fascinating because, he said, you got that now? And I said, yeah, I think it is. And he said, well, what don't you have about it? He would really take the time. And so, that sealed my fate with him in terms of good stuff. And he was always pretty interesting. And that's, and then a couple of times during that week, at least, and I did spend some time with him after as well. But during that week, a couple of times at the end of the day, when the doctors had gone home, etc., he flew doctors in every day for 10-hour lectures kind of thing. At the end of the day, often Dr. Fulton and myself and maybe one other person would be there. He said, guys, want to go for dinner? Let's go. Hop in my car. So we jump in his old Cadillac he had. He'd take us to his favorite site. It was a restaurant where he didn't have to leave a tip. I think he hated leaving a damn tip. But, he did. Anyway, so I had some dinner with him, and honestly, he talked for the 10 hours. He just went fact after fact after fact, and numbers and dates. And he remembered every bloody thing. He said that September 8th, 1946, or whatever. He said we had Jimmy Smith in here, and he did this, and he produced this curve and everything going on, and he just nonstop. And during the lecture, we'd have 3 or 4 hours in the morning, then he'd take a break at lunch. Usually have somebody take us through the zoo and everything else, but at lunchtime there, he would not stop talking. He would just keep repeating numbers and facts and figures and names and go on and on and on and on. And then when we went to supper, those couple nights for supper, he never stopped. Same damn thing. He'd said it 10 times, but when he talked to you, he looked you right in the face. So I mean, I was almost ready to fall asleep a couple times. I was tired of listening to the damn guy, but you couldn't take your eyes off him. He was just fascinating. And just full of facts and figures and numbers. His brain was going 100 miles an hour.
It's amazing.
Very, very interesting.
Now, when you set up your gym down in South America, what made you want to do this? What made you want to take such a journey and create a place so far away? What lured you?
Well, it didn't start that way. I actually married a woman from down there. That was the first mistake I made. Anyway, I met a girl. I was teaching college in Virginia, in Danville, Virginia, 4 years down there, and they had a group of people from South America come up every year to learn English as a second language. And I met a girl there that was from Caracas, and I liked her, and so I went down to Caracas to visit her as a tourist. And I was running around the golf course one day and met a guy that, young kid, about 18 years old, playing golf. I stopped for a minute and talked a little bit of golf, and he said, "Hey," I think my high school is looking for a phys ed teacher. And he said, "I'll tell you what," he said, I'll drive you up there tomorrow. So the kid drove me up to the school, and I still had a contract at Averett College there in Danville. So anyway, I got an interview, and I think they were desperate at the time because school was going to start in about a month. So they hired me as the director of the physical education department, 5 teachers underneath me, and they offered me 3 times what I was making in Danville, Virginia. So
Wow.
I said, I'm there, plus airplane tickets, plus this. So they made it very attractive. Anyway, I taught 4 years there, and it was nice. Big American high school, the only one in the city of 5 million people, so it's a big school. And I just taught normal phys ed stuff, and I saved some money up, and became interested in maybe setting up a Nautilus ship. There was nothing there other than a couple of lousy barbell places. So I started off with 12 machines, and then bought 13 more, and then bought 11 more. I got 36 in total. And over time, and then I bought the big Medics machine. I had the $60,000 Medics machine there.
And around what time was this? Around what year?
I went there. I went to Caracas in 1972. I taught till 1976. I taught till 1980. I opened up my gym in 1980.
Okay, awesome.
After I'd been there 4 years.
Yeah.
And then I left in 1990. So I ran it for 10 years.
Amazing.
And it was quite successful. Anything you did here in the States, whether you're a plumber, electrician, teacher, you could make more money down there than you ever could in the States.
Wow.
So it was ridiculous. But then the country fell apart in 1982, shortly after I opened my gym up, and the amount of money you made in dollars was just went down the drain. Also, you couldn't get the money out of the country. So I opened up this Medics rehab center as well with the back machine. It was like taking a spaceship down there. The doctors didn't understand it. So it was a mistake in terms of that. 1988 that was, and then 1990 I said, I've had enough. The country was at a low.
Yeah.
When I was once making about $25,000 a month with my initial gym, I was making about $1,000 a month, and it was going down, and I had the place full.
Yeah.
It was still a thriving business, but it was just stupid to be there.
So
and then they doubled my rent.
Did you sell off the gym or leave the equipment behind, or?
I sold the gym. Again, couldn't get the money out of the country. It was all in Venezuela money. And so I returned to the States in 1990 with about $5,000 in my pocket. That's all I had. And we ended up we brought back, I think it was 12 Nautilus machines and the Medics lumbar machine, which was a big one. I had a different business partner for that. We brought it back to the States here and put it in storage because we wanted to maybe do something. And about a year later, we hooked up with a chiropractor and set up a place in Coral Springs, Florida, with the Medics testing center and exercise. And we did the same thing that they were advocating at the time with the Medics protocol, 12-week protocol, and the whole thing. And it was pretty successful. But I had 2 business partners at the time. It was I was doing all the work, and they were getting a third of the profit. So I got tired of that after about 3 years. Sold my big machine to a guy that I worked for about 15 years after that, and I found it better to not have my own business and just work for somebody else. I was tired of that stuff. So.
Sure. And now, do you still own any Nautilus equipment these days? Way back, all these years later?
Do I still have any?
Yeah.
No, I don't.
Oh, okay.
I wish I did. I wish I had some of the old ones. John Turner's got a buddy up there in Canada. I went to see his display. John thinks he's got about the best display in Canada of stuff, old stuff. And it was absolutely fabulous. I'm going to go up there this summer, see it again. I didn't see all the pieces, but some really old stuff. My stuff was 1980.
Yeah.
And still would be antique by today's standards, but this guy had stuff from probably the early 70s. So.
Yeah.
And speaking of equipment, When I went to see Dr. Fulton about 3 months ago. We met him in a building. We went up there on one of his days off, and he's got a bunch of buildings in front where he's got all of his medical staff and stuff like that, where he does his treatments. Beautiful place, just state of the art kind of stuff. And but in the back, we met in the building in the back. He had 10 acres of land there. So we went to this prefab building, and then Fulton was in there, and we just chatted a little bit. Well, he had in that building, he must have had at least 150, maybe 200 Nautilus machines that he had collected over the years. He had Arthur's wife's chrome pieces.
Wow.
The entire machine chrome, the weight stacks chrome, absolutely gorgeous. And then he had all sorts of old ones. I recognize most of them, but just a pile of stuff in there, and it wasn't organized in any way. It was just stuff that he collected.
We need to find this guy so we can go shopping.
You could. I don't know whether he'd sell you anything, and he's certainly got duplicates, but he's got some stuff there. I don't think it's as antique as what this Mike Petrella had in Canada there, but anyway, we come across this line of, remember the Nautilus machine, the original ones were blue, that blue.
Sure, of course.
Well, we came across a set of about 15 machines that were blue, and they had these ugly off-white pads that were glittery gold, the pads. And Fulton said, oh, these machines over here once belonged to Elvis Presley. Bullshit. I think, come on, Doc. And he said, listen to the story. And that doctor's not a bullshitter. So he said this, that he and his son were some of the medical doctors to take over for him. And he said, we're out shopping one day, wanted to get a couple of pieces, and came across this set, and the owner of them said that these once belonged to Elvis Presley. So, and Fulton said the same thing. He rolled his eyes and said, yeah, trying to get a few extra bucks out of me. And the guy said, no. He said, anyway. So Fulton ended up buying these 15 pieces. And they were ugly. I mean, you looked at it and thought, who's got bad taste? It had to be Elvis Presley. They looked horrible, the combination of the pads. So when they got them back to their place in Daytona there, they saw that a couple of pads were scraped up a little bit. So Fulton said, I took 2 or 3 pads off, put them under my arm, and I went over to DeLand, Florida, which is not far away, and gave them to so-and-so who did all the pads for Nautilus from day one. He said, I walked in the door. He said, the guy almost passed out. He said, my God, he said, I never thought I would ever see those pieces again. He said, I made those for Elvis Presley. So the story was true.
That's awesome.
That's great.
Yeah, made for Elvis Presley. So anyway,
so
I don't think Elvis used it very much.
Right.
They're in pretty good shape.
But he thought it was a good idea at least. He invested.
Yeah, exactly. And he wouldn't part with them, not because they're Elvis Presley. And I don't know what he's going to do with all of them. Maybe he's going to set up a big gym somewhere and get them all going again. But he certainly has a display of them.
Well, Gary, you're 6 weeks away from retirement. What are you gonna do? You just gonna hit train once a week and join the senior PGA Tour, or what?
No, I'm not gonna do it. If I was that good, I'd be up there. I've got a few bad issues myself. I had 2 operations. One when I was 30 years old, one when I was 32, down in Venezuela by a neurosurgeon, and I did a new garage basically or something. I don't know how bad my back was, but I had 2 operations stupidly, and I knew it was going to catch up to me at some point. About 3 years ago, I got arthritis starting to form, and so I've got kind of discomfort 24/7 time I wake up in the morning, and it's just that my back is strong as can be, but strength apparently doesn't count with arthritis. So I'm not able to play a lot of golf. I can do some, but I can't last very long. So that's my fate there. And even though with that back machine, I'll tell you, once I got that. I had the Nautilus gym in my Nautilus back machine rather, my original gym, and I was using that, thinking it was okay. Once I went to see Arthur Jones, he said my back machine doesn't work, the Nautilus one, and then he explained why, and I thought, oh shit, at least I didn't hurt myself on it. But anyway, so I got the medics down there, and once I got on that was 1988. I've been on it ever since I went through the protocol. And then I started weaning myself off of it to maintain strength, and got to the point where I was using it once a month, and that's what research suggested with that machine. Once a month sounds incredible, but it's actually what works then for maintenance. So I did once a month, honestly, for 26 years, 25 25 years, once a month, 90 seconds, 10 repetitions, and my back was pain-free for 26 years.
Wow, that's amazing.
Which is a hell of an investment, you know.
Yeah.
And then lately, because my back's become arthritic, I jumped up my weights. I thought, well, maybe if I get stronger, it'll help. It hasn't. I upped my frequency as well. I'm doing it once every 2 weeks, but that's all, which is still pretty economical. I have the exercise version in my house here.
Oh, that's
I
fantastic.
bought it so I wouldn't have to go rushing out because a friend of mine's got one, but he's an hour and a half away. So
Yeah, that's amazing.
You mentioned in the book that the MedX low back had been nominated for a Nobel Prize. Do you remember in medicine? Yeah. Do you remember what year that was?
Well, it came out in 1986, so I would assume shortly after that. And I'm not sure who nominated it or who submitted a nomination or how that process even works, but I was told that by Jim Flanagan or somebody at MedX when I went for a lecture. And of course, Arthur, I think, wrote about it a little bit too, that it was up for the Nobel Prize. And it should have been. Heck, it was the guy's life work pretty much getting that thing together.
Yeah.
And it was so very, very successful. But Arthur, I remember one of his quotes, he said, I didn't win the damn thing, the prize. He said, because I didn't wear a white coat and call myself doctor. That's how he used to describe it.
Yeah.
So, anyway. Dr. Fulton got along with him pretty well. Fulton was hired by him in probably 1971 or 72, and stayed with him all that time. And Fulton, they respected each other quite a bit. Arthur used him for medical input ideas, even though Arthur was pretty brilliant in that, anatomy and physiology and stuff like that. But I remember Fulton telling me one time, he said, I disagree with Arthur when I first met him on many things, many physiological facts. And he said, in every case, he eventually proved himself right. He would build a machine and prove to me that he was right. And do this and prove to me that he was right. He said it was amazing. This guy was right on. And Fulton said to me one time, I was at a conference, I was sitting beside him, and I was just chatting with him, and he said when he lectures to us, medical doctors, he said, he's up here somewhere, and he put his hand up over his head. He said, we're down here somewhere, and put his hand about waist high. He said, and he whispered in my ear, he said, I don't even know what the hell he's talking about. and Fulton's a pretty smart man. He was talking about anatomy, physiology. Fulton said, I don't even know what the hell he's talking about. So Arthur was out in space there. He was pretty good. And if you walked in on one of his lectures, and if you never had that opportunity, I wish you had. And didn't even know he was. Just sat in a room and at the back there, started to listen. Within 5 minutes, you think, "Craig, this guy's not on this planet." I mean, he wasn't that he talked above anybody or that he was, showing off his brilliance or anything like that. The guy spoke 10 languages and stuff like that, but he just had a way of communicating. Very logical thinker, and he would go A, B, C, D, E, boom. And if you asked a question that he didn't know, he would exactly tell you that. He said, I don't know, but he said, let's find out. And it would spark maybe another 3 years or whatever he was doing. So he was very inquisitive and very complete.
Much like yourself, Gary, by the way.
Pardon me?
I said, much like yourself. Reading your book sounds very similar to Arthur Jones' communication style. Writing's very logical.
Yeah, I was fascinated by him and influenced by him without a doubt. But I didn't have anywhere near the brain power that he had. He could ask a question out of nowhere and get you just turn you right upside down. Just one question, boom, and get you rethinking what the hell you're thinking. And I saw him do that with a couple of bodybuilders. I saw him do that with doctors. Doctors tried to corner him when he lectured to them, and he would start basically his lecture off by insulting them in some way. And so you either loved him or you hated him. There was nothing in between. One of those lectures in that week that I was there, he flew in 5 orthopedics from Kansas City, and he had them. Jim Flanagan had them sit on the floor like kindergarten in a semicircle. And I wonder what the hell's going on here. I'd never seen that. And it was probably because they had purchased a Cybex machine and he was punishing them or something. But, anyway, he had them sit on the floor, and Arthur wasn't even in the room yet. I didn't even know where he was. And so when they got all sat down and they had suits on and they were all dressed up and stuff, Arthur came out from kind of behind the curtain, and he had his hands behind his back, and Arthur's about my size, 5'8". He wasn't particularly good looking at that point. And he's was dressed cleanly and everything else, but he walked very slowly right up into the middle of this semicircle, and he didn't introduce himself. He never usually did, because he said basically that you're going to find out who I am. I don't have to introduce myself. So he got right in the middle of the circle. He said, gentlemen, he said, today we'll be taking grade 1 math and grade 2 physics. And then he hesitated to look down at them all. And he said, I hope you can stay with me. That's what he said. So he would piss them off to start with, and then go from there. The biggest insult I ever saw was, and Arthur was bold, he didn't care. His attitude in terms of selling equipment was that, doctor, if you're not smart enough to buy my equipment, he said, then the hell with you, the next guy will. So he was at the University of Florida one day, and I went to 2 of these lectures. He had a contract with the university. He donated $10 million. Part of the deal was that he would lecture every other week to a group, whoever showed up. And there was usually a long room, and a long skinny room, and there was probably about 150 people there both times I went. And that's one where Jim invited me to it. And I had heard the lecture before, the information stuff. I was sitting in about the 3rd row, and Arthur lectured, and a lot of the information was new to some people in there. And after that, they had flown in a group from New York City, among whom was a renowned orthopedic surgeon, Dr. So-and-so, one of the best in the world, type of thing. And Arthur was talking about low backs. So anyway, the lecture went fine, and Arthur had a microphone where he was, and there was a microphone at the back of the room for questions. And he fielded a couple of questions, and everything was fine. And this doctor came up to the microphone. He was all dressed up. He thought he was a doctor. And he asked a question that I could have asked. It was, pretty spot-on question, I thought. Well, Arthur didn't like the question. I looked at Arthur as he was asking the question, and Arthur had this kind of frown on his face. He was staring at the guy like, you idiot, what the hell are you asking him? Anyway, when the guy finished the question, Arthur never said a word. And he always liked kind of the fear factor, the impact of his approach. And it wasn't a show off, it's just what he did. He never answered the question. He stared the guy right down the way. The guy was 30, 40 yards away, whatever. He stared at him like this, locked his eyes on him. And then he walked off in front of the stage, never took his eyes out of this guy. And he walked slowly down the side of the hallway there. And he got right up in this guy's face. Now, the microphone happened to be there. And it looked like 2 boxers before a match. Get right in each other's face. And you could hear a pin drop. I mean, I don't know what the hell was going to happen. Arthur always carried guns with him, so I didn't know what was going to happen. It was eerie. And he walks up to this guy, and he says, sir, he said, that is the stupidest goddamn question I've ever heard. He said, where the hell did you go to medical school? That's what he said. And it was this doctor, the doctor from New York, Dr. Special, whatever. Where the hell did you go to medical school? And that's the way Arthur was. He didn't give a damn. The sales guy, Flanagan, probably shaking his head, oh, Christ, there's another sale out the window. Don't that balls, put it that way. Cojones, as we say in Spanish.
Yeah, I actually am lucky enough to have some of his lectures both on CDs and on DVDs. So I've actually had a chance to see them in that respect. It would have been nice to see them live.
Yeah, and he winged them all. Honestly, he just would walk into the room, and he'd have everything set up in terms of what he wanted to demonstrate with his equipment or whatever. And he instead of going from A, B, C, D down the line every time, he would start at P and go back to F and then over to A, and he just wing it. And he started telling a story about animals, and it was very interesting, put it that way.
Yeah, for sure.
You never know where the hell he was going to start. And I'll tell you, when he asked for a volunteer, well, we need a volunteer to come on my back machine over here. And if you put your hand up, it was like a suicide. Volunteering for your own funeral. Because he'd bring you up and either embarrass the hell out of you, or he'd put you on a machine and kick the crap out of you, and then send you back to your seat. It was kind of funny the way he did things. And it was all basically to make a point, not to make him look good and you bad, just to make a point about education. Someone terrific educator. And John Turner had some time with him too.
Yeah.
I think John flew down and met with him at one time. So when I go back to Canada, I go back every summer. I go and visit John because my brother lives only about a half an hour away. So
Sweet.
John and I spend the day together and exchange some stories. And I'll tell you, John's website is absolutely terrific. I see there's certification groups out there now, NASM and all this BS stuff. they got their big textbooks full of garbage and they twist the physiology to what they want to say. But I tell you, I think the best education anyone could ever get would be simply to read entirely through John's stuff, all of Arthur's articles.
Yeah.
And then you get an education. And this stuff can't be denied. You know, if Arthur didn't know what the answer was to something, then he would tell you, hey, I don't know, but we're working on it.
Yeah, that's an awesome resource for sure. I point people in that direction quite a bit, and John is a really, really wonderful moderator for that information because he's willing to take the time to give you such great answers if you reach out to him, and he has it all at his fingertips. Many times he's answered questions for me, and he always adds articles or pictures or diagrams and whatever. He points you in the right direction. Yeah, really great stuff.
I actually I started collecting Nautilus stuff from 1980 when I bought my machines and stuff, and so I actually had some stuff that John did not have. And whenever I'll say something to John or mention something, and he says, "Geez, I don't think I got that article. Where'd you get that from?" Or he was looking through my first book the other day, and he says, "Do you still have that reference there?" And I said, "Yeah, I do." So I'll make a couple of copies and send it to him. So he's through me, and I'm not bragging about that, but he's added a little bit to his resource collection.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Well, Gary, thank you so much for coming on with us today. We really appreciate it. I loved reading your book, and I can't wait to get into the other ones that Liam is going to let me borrow.
Well, I might write a few in my. I've still got some spark in me. I might write a few more books. I kind of like writing, the process of writing itself. I'm liable to come up with a few more.
Well, if there's anything we can ever do for you, all you need to do is let us know.
Yeah.
Now, what is your orientation? John gave me a little bit of background, but in terms of how you guys got this podcast started?
I've been doing this for a long time. I started right around the time you were winding down in South America. I was just getting started. I started in 1988.
Okay.
And I was in college in New York. I was an athlete myself. I played soccer, and but like a lot of people back then, I didn't know anything about strength training. I was in the gym 6 days a week, 3 hours a day.
Yeah.
But I was lucky that my very, very out of college, I graduated, and I thought I knew a lot because I read muscle magazines, and back then there was no real certifications. I just bugged a local gym until they hired me because I wanted something to do until I figured out what I was going to do when I grew up, And the first gym I got a job at was in Washington, D.C., and they were directly linked to the Nautilus factory in Virginia. And just by coincidence, the guy that owned it was a hardcore Nautilus advocate, and everything was Nautilus principles. They had multiple lines of Nautilus equipment, all the old generations, the double machines.
Yeah.
So I was just by luck, I was exposed to all that information. And of course, I ignored it initially because I said, well, that's not what the muscle magazines say.
Yeah.
But I was taught as my job to teach it the Nautilus way. So I taught the Nautilus principles to everybody every day, but ignored them myself until I sort of, had some epiphanies that led me back to that it all made the most sense. So I've been an advocate of it for, it's 30 years this year that I've been doing this stuff.
Yeah.
Jesse and I have just been working together for a brief time, but
Liam, we work at the same commercial gym, and I've been a strength coach now for just over a year, and I kind of was looking for somebody to, kind of be a mentor, and about, I don't know, maybe like 4 or 5 months in, I really started to actually listen to the things that Liam was saying, and it kind of turned my world upside down for the better, and haven't looked back. So kind of hit the jackpot on that one.
If you mentioned to any trainers nowadays, they don't even know who Arthur Jones is. He may as well be, Joe Blow.
Yeah.
They don't know what he did or that he existed. How are podcasts productive? You guys have sponsors? I mean, what's the object other than getting the word out? What's the object of a podcast?
Yeah, well, that's the number one thing. Number one is just proliferating high quality information to as many people as possible. And eventually, obviously we'd love to have sponsors so that we can, reach even more people. It's a networking tool. We've already had, we've had John Turner on. We had Mike Lepowski, who's the president of the IART. We've had, Bob Sikora. We've had Tom Kelso was another one that Liam mentioned. We're just bringing in a lot of different people from the high intensity community and trying to get out that good information. Basically, just bring a new network to the guests that we have on. So if you'd like to give people, a way to get in contact with you, we'd love to have you share that.
Yeah, I have no problem with it. You got my email? Did I have an email address, obviously?
Yeah. Do you mind just saying that?
Yeah. The email is it's Gary Bannister, GaryBannister, 2 N's, and then the number 48. So Gary Bannister 48@yahoo.com.
All right. And tell them the names of the books that you have at the moment. Just go ahead and share those with us, too.
Well, the first book was published, I think, in 2005, and Arthur Jones was still alive at the time. It was a tribute to the Mountains Adventures called In Arthur's Shadow, and it took me 8 years to write that. It's about a 635-page book or so. And just putting together just little stories from my experience, and basically a regurgitation of his exercise philosophy in those little stories. The second one I wrote, I think I published it in 2015 or 16, and it was called "If You Like Exercise, Chances Are You're Doing It Wrong." And that was a quote from Arthur himself, and it's got his picture on the front cover. It's a basic how to do strength training book with the Nautilus philosophy wrapped around it. And the third one I published just a year ago or so is called Golf Performance Training, and it's What They Won't Tell You. And it's basically a critique of the Titleist Performance Institute program, TPI program, and all the accolades that go with that. It's a little bit of a critique on that, and based on the article that Arthur wrote about specificity of training. So
yeah, I have to say that if you like exercise, chances are you're doing it wrong. That one's jumped up to the top of my list of favorites.
Well, I hope you enjoy it. I hope you enjoy them all. And if you need other copies, I've still got some copies of all three of them here. So.
Yeah, no, we appreciate it. That's fantastic. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you guys having me on, and best of luck. And I'm not much of a traveler, so I don't know that I'll ever be in California or anything like that. But if I'm your way, or if I can help you in any way, just give me a call. And I'll be more than happy to do that.
We'll definitely be staying in touch. And you know what I'm thinking now in the back of my mind that maybe Jesse and I are going to crash one of these visits to John Turner. We're gonna find a way to show up sometime when you guys are there together.
Oh, that'd be nice.
We'll just do the wheel. We'll do the wheel, and we'll each one person will train the next, and everybody will train, and everybody will work out.
I could use a trip to Canada. It's been a while.
Well, pretty nice place in the summertime. Don't go there in the wintertime.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Gary.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thanks, gentlemen, and I appreciate you having me on.
All right, Gary. Thank you. Take care.
Take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Truth Not Trends.
Truth Not Trends.
If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, rate, and review us.
And don't forget to tell a friend.
And for God's sake, stay off that Bosu ball.
No.
Mixed by Desmond McNeese for We Mixed It, LLC. Go to whatsoundsawesome.com.